The third wrong concept of our four major categories is Wesleyanism, named after John Wesley. Jacob Presch, who we mentioned in a previous sermon, is a proponent of this faulty view. It says that God's election is based on his foreknowledge, but not necessarily in accord with it. In other words, God's decrees are conditional. He changes his mind. That's why we did the sovereignty of God first in this series of doctrine, is because we needed to understand the nature of what God is doing. This is the beginning of major error, and it goes back to a guy named Jacob Arminius who lived in the 1500s. His view denies eternal security. It reveals a God who is changing and who makes mistakes. John Wesley could not decide what was right, and so he followed the teaching of Jacob Arminius after asking God for a sign and then throwing lots twice. The lots came up and he said, okay, I'm an Arminianist. But we don't get our theology from happenstance and chance. Instead, we get it from the Bible. John Wesley, the Methodists, the Church of God, Mennonites, and others who hold this view are wrong, frightfully wrong. Like the previous view, they believe that God created all and then he permitted the fall. Then he provides salvation for all people. God knows who the elect are based on the foreseen faith of those who believe. Because of this faith, he applies salvation only to believers, but believers can lose their salvation. Going back to the Garden of Eden for an example, God creates the garden and the man. The man disobeys God, and the catastrophe of sin enters into the realm. Man is forced from the garden into a stream of existence, one generation leading to the next. However, that stream leads away from the garden to the abyss of hell, complete and total separation from God. God, however, offers the corrective measure for man. He sends his Son to die for their sin. The Son calls out, "Come to me and be saved." Some never hear the message and they continue through life without Christ. Some respond and come to him. Others like the existence that they are living and they have no care about what their end will be, or they simply fail to believe what they hear and they reject what God has offered. For those who come to his Son, however, they can never know if they have upset God enough for him to take away the salvation that he has provided. They must keep doing things or not doing things in order to continue to be saved. If they fail in the doing or not doing, God removes his salvation from them and they are returned to the highway of hell. There is never true safety, and in fact, those who are saved can't really tell if they are saved or not from day to day. They spend their entire life trying to please a group of lower-level pastors, preachers, and scholars who carefully decide what constitutes acceptance or rejection. When God says in the book of Hebrews that those who believe have entered God's rest, that is a conditional statement. When God says in the book of Ephesians that the seal of his Holy Spirit is a guarantee, it is so in name only. But a guarantee in name is not a guarantee at all. In this, God and what he says in his word cannot be trusted. Where Jesus says that hearing his word and believing in him who sent him results in 1, everlasting life, 2, that they will not come into judgment, and 3, that they have passed from death to life, does not really mean that. Jesus' words are not to be taken at face value, but rather they are conditional statements. As this is so, one must earn his salvation, and thus salvation is not by grace through faith. This is a failed system of deceit, which comes from a God who vacillates and who changes. His decrees are conditional.